going on, everybody? It's Rural Widger coming at you with a brand new video, and we are back tonight with some more Pokemon content. Now, I wanted to do another Pokemon video because in my most recent locals, we actually got to play with the Twilight Masquerade set a little bit early, about a week early, compared to its release, and wow, was it fun. I ended up using Gardevoir Munkidori. I was thinking about building a deck like Turbo Ogerpon or even Dragapult or something, but this was kind of flung on to me last minute that we were playing with the new stuff, so I quickly just swapped out a bunch of things, and I actually ended up doing pretty well. My only loss was due to a deck building mistake that I made, where I swapped out one card instead of a different one on accident, and if that card would have been the right one, then I would have won there, which was really unfortunate. But I ended up doing pretty well against a lot of new stuff. Chinpow, which isn't really very new. And then also Turbo Hands, but the big thing was against Dragapult. That was a really fun and really good match, and so I wanted to showcase the list that I ended up using, and the one that I'll probably end up taking into the future of the Twilight Masquerade format, because this set actually does a lot of really cool stuff for Gardevoir. With that being said, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get right into my Gardevoir deck profile for the June 2024 format, post-Twilight Masquerade. Starting off, of course, with the Gardevoir line itself. We have 3 copies of Teleportation Burst Ralts, 1 copy of the Memory Skip Ralts, 4 copies, of the Refinement Curlia, and I am now only on 2 copies of Gardevoir EX, and I'm no longer playing the Gallade. So there are a few things to talk about here. Notably, I wanted to talk about the Memory Skip Ralts because I know a lot of people are actually cutting it in favor of another Teleportation Burst Ralts, and it's mainly because the Dragapult is able to one-shot the Ralts if it's sitting on your bench, the Memory Skip one specifically, whereas it can't one-shot the Teleportation Burst Ralts, and that is an incredibly valid point, and I will consider playing a 4th Teleportation Burst Ralts in its place. I do think that there is a time and place, though, for the Memory Skip Ralts to come into play, being able to hit certain things in certain matchups, such as Charizard, or hell, even the Dragapult itself if they don't have Rescue Board. Combos really well with something like an Unfair Stamp or an Iono that can really dwindle their hand, make them unable to go into something else in a pinch, and it can end up being pretty good, but I do think that having the 4 Teleportation Burst Ralts to avoid those Dragapult damages is not bad at all. And then, of course, like in my last profile, I actually did have the Gallade in here, the Buddy Catch one. However, due to the addition of the Munkidori engine and stuff like that, I had to cut a lot of things, including some of the more niche one-of supporters that he was searching, and that ended up letting him catch the cut as well. It ended up not really coming up very much, or at least I didn't really feel like on paper it would come up very much now that I've cut my supporter count significantly, especially the one-ofs, and so basically all I really felt like I needed was the Gardevoirs. I was going into too many situations where I had both my Curlias evolve, one into Gardevoir, one into Gallade. The Gallade gives me a little bit of value, but then, I mean, I don't really have another Curlia backed up, and so a deck like Roaring Moon, or, Charizard, or anything that can boss in the Gardevoir and kill it in one shot. They were doing that, and then I didn't have a Curlia ready, and because I don't play Rare Candy or anything like that, I had to give them an extra turn on top of that just to get another Gardevoir set up if they don't end up screwing me over by killing the benched Ralts or Curlia. So really, I feel like this is all you need. Moving on to the attackers, we are still on the 2 Drifloon as well as the 1 Screamtail here. I've always been an advocate for 2 Drifloon, and I'm happy to see that other people are doing the same. I feel like not playing 2 is kind of criminal, not only due to things like Lost City, but also just the fact that you really don't want to have to waste your Super Rods just putting the Drifloon back constantly. And there's going to be a lot of decks setting up multiple 300+ beaters that you're going to want to beat over yourself without having to, again, use Super Rod or anything like that. You want to just be able to take the knock with the Drifloon and then follow up with another Drifloon on the next turn on another 2 Prizer. And then, of course, you have Screamtail as well. Screamtail is absolutely massive in a lot of matchups. Unfortunately, in this current build, it can no longer one-shot Pidgeots on the bench, which makes your Pidgeot control and sometimes your Charizard matchup a little bit quote-unquote rougher, but it's really not the end of the world. You have other ways to play around that, but it's still just so good at sniping the bench and getting rid of that last extra prize or 2, or, dodging things like Heavy Baton, for example, in the Hands matchup, which I loathe that matchup, and so it just makes a lot of things so much easier. For our supporter Psychic Mons, we are, of course, on the 1 Mimikyu and the 1 Fluttermane. I did end up dropping Klefki. I didn't really feel like it came up enough. Like, it had its niche plays, but honestly, Fluttermane just does the same thing and has an actually good and useful attack, and the Klefki was just kind of like a dead space. So I really didn't feel like I needed it. It didn't really come up. I cut it, like, literally a day or 2 after I actually made the last profile. But a new addition to the deck is the brand new Munkidori out of Twilight Masquerade. Now, for those of you that don't know, this Munkidori has the ability that if it has a dark energy attached to it, you can, once per turn, move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And this, it doesn't sound like super crazy overall, but it's massive in this deck in particular. Of course, with your Psychic Embrace ability on Gardevoir, you're going to be spreading a lot of damage counters amongst your Pokemon, and that can be really good at fueling Munkidori's ability. Basically, you take whatever damage you're already going to do, and then combining it with the Munkidori's extra damage for an extra 30, and this is really, really good with cards like Drifloon, of course, because Drifloon's going to be having a lot of damage counters on it, and so for an extra energy, basically, you kind of have to attach a little bit more in order to get full value out of it, but you can use the Munkidori to do some damage to a Charizard or a Dragapult, for example, and now with just a Bravery Charm as opposed to a Cape, the Charizard or Dragapult is in one-shot range, which is pretty huge. It's also pretty good at sniping some small things on the bench. I actually ended up taking my win against Chinpao earlier yesterday with it because I ended up putting 30 on the Bidoof that was sitting on his bench, and then he put in Manaphy, not knowing or not really realizing that I could just go for another Munkidori play, knock the Bidoof on the bench, and then punch the Manaphy with my active Gardevoir, taking my last 2 prizes in one turn. It was pretty huge. Also just good at getting pesky damage counters off of some of your other Pokemon, things like your Curlia that you ended up having to retreat with Psychic Embrace, and then things like your Gardevoir, of course, but it's also really good, of course, in the Dragapult matchup. Dragapult's going to be putting a lot of damage counters on your bench that you don't really want sitting there, leaving your stuff one-shottable, and so you're just going to take that to your advantage, again, put them on the Dragapult and end up one-shotting things, or you can even start sniping back against their bench against things like Dracloak, Dreepy, etc. Overall, it adds a massive layer of support to the deck. I was iffy on it at first because I was like, oh, I don't want to play Dark Energy and stuff, but trust me when I say that this card is huge with Dragapult running around. For some of our non-psychic supporter mons, we are, of course, on the Greninja, absolutely amazing for the energy acceleration, or at least in your discard pile. And then we have the one Luminion. I am still playing it. I still think it is a really good card in this variant of the deck. I am still on blind second Arven TM Evo plays. I'm not playing the Hyper Aroma or anything like that. So you really want to see Arven as much as possible, and Luminion will help you do that. I'm not playing Collapse Stadium or anything, and I'm not even playing Turos anymore, so it can become a liability at times, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is, you know, at that point. I mean, if you're playing against the Hands matchup, they already have a favorable matchup, so what if they Prime Catcher in the Luminion and take 3 prizes or whatever? You're probably in a bad spot regardless, etc., etc. Same with, like, Dragapult bossing it in, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world. Plus, you're only really using it, like, every once in a blue moon if you don't hard open Arven or the Evo and Energy and stuff like that. So once you get the Arven, unless you're searching a boss late game, the Luminion just becomes fodder for things like Ultra Ball or Refinement, so it's not like it's coming up all the time. And then for some bench protection, we are on the 1 Manaphy and 1 Jirachi. So a few different things here. If we were on the Going First Hyper Aroma variant, for example, I think I'd probably play the Relor Rabscaline instead, because not only does it cover every base that Manaphy and Jirachi do, but it's also good into Dragapult because they can't put things on your bench with Dragapult. The problem, though, is that in the blind second variant, by the time you bench your Relor off of your Poffin or something, they're probably already gonna have that Dragapult set up, and the Relor is going to die, meaning that you give them a free prize, compared to benching one of these 70 HP mons, which, I mean, to be fair, you're not benching these against Dragapult anyway because they don't do anything. But honestly, in just a lot of other matchups anyway, decks like Greninja or anything that can set up the Radiant Greninja or the Wellspring Ogerpon, if you're blinding second, they're going to have their turn 3 to probably set up one of those Pokemon and then start going for your bench regardless, which again will just give them an extra bunch of prizes when you could have just put the Manaphy or Jirachi down. Another thing on the topic of Jirachi is that I've noticed Lost Box has been falling off a lot lately now that Charizard is not the best deck and that Dragapult has started taking the reins a little bit, and we have a lot of other really good decks coming in, like, you know, the Raging Bolt Ogerpon deck. Only 1 energy can KO a Comfey with the Raging Bolt deck, which is really, really good. And so you don't really need Jirachi as much, and I'm thinking of cutting it for some other tech cards. I mean, yeah, if you do go against Lost Box, the Sableye can be a little bit annoying, but it's really not the end of the world, because most of the time, you're just going to take advantage of those damage counters if they leave some, like, extra ones, right? You're going to take advantage of those with your Munkidori regardless, so it's not as big of a deal, and you can just kind of cut the Jirachi for a little bit of a tech card, card, which I'll probably explain a little bit more later. That is it for our Pokemon. Moving on to our supporters, I'm playing 4 copies of Arven, 2 copies of Iono, and then I am playing a single copy of Boss's Orders. So as I mentioned earlier, we are drastically cutting out on the supporters, no longer playing the Airy, no longer playing the Turos. We are playing just these 7, though as I mentioned, you could cut Jirachi for something. That'd probably be like the 3rd Iono or something for some more hand disruption, but I think that with the new Spec we are playing, we don't really need too much more of that. But really, this is just your bread and butter supporter lineup. You really don't need too much more than this. Arven's grabbing your Evos and your Bravery Charms and whatever else niche item you might need at the time. You have Iono, which is going to significantly curb your opponent's advantage, especially if you try going for like a counter catcher trap in the late game. And then Boss's Orders is Boss's Orders, not too much to explain there. All of these just serve really important and strong roles in the deck, and by minimizing it into this tight package, we're not going to risk seeing too many, especially when we already have enough draw power off things like Refinement and Concealed cards regardless. Going into our items, we are playing 4 copies of Buddy Buddy Poffin, as well as 3 Ultra Ball, 1 Nest Ball, and 1 Heavy Ball. So these are our main key consistency cards in terms of fetching Pokemon. You of course have the Poffin, which is going to be grabbing most of your stuff, being your Drifloons, your Ralts, Manaphy, Jirachi, really anything you want that isn't named like Munkidori or like Screamtail, I think. And then you have your ball cards, which are just going to get everything else for you. I'm considering playing a second Nest Ball. That might be a thing that I cut the Jirachi for. Now that we have Munkidori in the deck, that's another Pokemon that we can't really exactly get off of our Poffin. We have to rely on Nest Ball or Artisan or even Ultra Ball at times, which isn't super favorable. You'd rather use those for things like your Screamtail. So, I mean, having that extra one could be really, really nice for setting up the Munkidori, because I don't really want to use the Ultra Ball to grab it right. I'd rather use a Nest Ball. So that might end up being what I'm doing. And now we move on to some of the other items in the deck, starting with the 2 Super Rods. I like having 2 in the deck. I know a lot of Guardy players do as well, because you can recycle things, like your Drifloons, of course, your Screamtails, your Gardevoirs, really anything you want. Munkidori and the Dark Energies are also really good to get now too, because you can just fetch them back later or dig for them off of the Refinement. Really, really good. Speaking of the Dark Energy and stuff, you are playing the 1 Earthen Vessel as well in this list. Really good for grabbing your Psychic Energies, of course, in the early game, but also in the mid game, you can actually grab a Darkness Energy for your Munkidori to start getting it live as well. We're also playing the 1 Lost Vacuum. This is mostly for the mirror match, but also for things such as the Iron Hands matchup. Getting rid of the Heavy Baton or even a Capsule is really, really huge. And then, of course, just getting rid of problem stadiums. Jamming Tower is a really big, annoying one. And getting rid of other really crucial tools, of course. We're also playing 1 copy of Counter Catcher. Counter Catcher, of course, being very strong. You are playing from behind this deck very typically. 1 copy of Switch. This is what the Gallade was technically in the deck for on accident for. I mentioned that there was a card that was supposed to be a different card earlier, and that caused me to lose. The Gallade was supposed to be swapped out for the copy of Switch, and I accidentally just straight up didn't do that, and I was sitting there with a Gallade in my hand looking like a dumb bitch with a Luminion in my active spot that the Switch would have gotten rid of, and I would have taken my last prizes, and I would have gone for game, but unfortunately, you can't always get what you want. And then we were playing the 1 Palpad as well. Puts back all of your supporters, of course. Things like your bosses is another really important one specifically. And then this is technically not an item, but we are also playing 1 copy of Artisan. Good at replacing other stadiums and helping get things like your Screamtail or now your Munkidori. Our final item is, of course, our brand new Spec. Replacing Hero's Cape in the deck, we now have 1 copy of Unfair Stamp. Wow, is this card amazing. It's come up in every single match at my locals now that I started using it. It just does so much work. You can use it as early as your 2nd turn. After your opponent takes the first prize and you use your TM Evo, you can do all of your stuff, setting up your Curlias and your Gardevoirs and stuff, and then Unfair Stamp to get the rest of your setup and put your opponent behind, start taking some big prizes and potentially make them have a hard time catching up. It just does so much work. Amazing in the late game as well, especially when you're going for a boss trap, because this is an item. You don't have to worry about using your boss in the same turn as it, and it's searchable off of Arven, which means you can grab your Bravery Charm as well in order to start getting some punches in while also disrupting your opponent. This card is just absolutely insane. Definitely my favorite Spec for the deck. The Hyper Aroma build is pretty cute, not gonna lie, but it just feels like Mirage Step at home, especially considering Arizu is already a card, and yeah, despite it being a supporter over an item, I just don't really think the Hyper Aroma build is as good. Moving on to our tools, very simple here, just playing the 2 Bravery Charm and the 2 TM Evos. Not much really to explain about TM Evo, it just evolves into your Curlias and stuff when you're blinding second. But the thing is about the 2 Bravery Charm, I think I explained a little bit more earlier, but we are not playing either of the capes, being the Hero's Cape, of course, being replaced by the Unfair Stamp. You can only play one A-Spec. And then the Luxurious Cape, I really do not like that card, honestly. I think it's really bad because while it does give you that extra 100 HP, it just really makes all of your single prizers a big liability. It takes away your big strength of being able to attack with single prizers, and it's really bad in a certain matchup such as Iron Hands. Of course, I can take that extra prize, or any deck that can play Iron Hands, of course, with Lugia now being able to play it, you know, Chin Pao still occasionally playing it instead of the Ursaluna. Like, it just really feels bad, and the only real interaction that you miss out on because of it is, of course, sniping Pidgeots or anything with 280 or more HP off of the Screamtail. Even with the Munkidori, the most you can do with a Bravery Charm with Screamtail is 270, which, again, a little bit rough, but that means you can just take the knock on the next turn with your Munkidori anyway, so it's not like the biggest deal. Basically like you're using Radiant Alakazam almost, and so, yeah, it's not like a big problem. Besides, in most of your matchups, you know, again, like Dragapult, Charizard, everything like that with 300 or more HP, all you need is the Munkidori to place some damage counters, and then the Bravery Charm to finish the job with your Drifloon. And even still, Screamtail going up to 240 or even 270 with using the Bravery Charm and or the Munkidori is still really good. I mean, you're still getting a lot of sniping potential. It's just not as strong as it is with the Luxurious Cape, but it doesn't make your Screamtail a massive liability up in the front like it usually ends up being afterward. And finally, for the energy, pretty simple. I mean, we're playing 9 copies of the Psychic Energy, very standard, same to the last list as usual, nothing really crazy. And then, of course, for the Munkidori, we are playing 2 Dark Energies. So this is also seeming to be pretty standard. You could technically play a 1-1 line, but that just means that the Dark Energy getting prize is a massive liability, so just having that extra one really doesn't hurt. Plus, if you get it attached early on, the second one just becomes concealed card fodder or refinement fodder, so it's really not a bad thing at all. Plus, I mean, it gives you extra things to manually attach for a retreat as well, which is good in case your Pokemon is about to die and can't Psychic Embrace, or if you're getting boss trapped with your Greninja or Luminion or something, so it can be pretty helpful there too. And that's going to do it for my Gardevoir list. I really hope y'all did enjoy. I really love playing this deck. It is one of my favorite decks in all of Pokemon. Gardevoir is one of my favorite Pokemon, and I really like all the changes that have happened to the deck since Twilight Masquerade's release. It feels a lot more fluid and a little bit less clunky in a sense, and also it just gives you a lot more flex options against a lot of matchups. I think it's overall going to be a very solid deck going into the next format, but that's just my opinion. Let me know down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure leave a like, as I'll split this video and the channel into the YouTube recommended. And if you like this content or somewhere like it, like the rest of my TCG content, both Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever you may like, then perhaps consider subscribing and turning on notifications, because support your channel more than anything else, and it's absolutely free, and we're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. Also, to support me directly with getting some awesome TCG merchandise in the process, check out Tapio cards and link down below, use code AURORA5 for profits off your purchase at checkout, and to support me financially. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.